Cool.
Good afternoon and welcome to our masterclass on using Hogan personality assessments and Hogan 360. My name is Peter Berry, the Managing Director of Peter Berry Consultancy, and we have been in business for 30 years, and for 20 years we've been using Hogan personality assessments. My wife Shane Nealon and myself had the good fortune to meet Doctors Robert and Joyce Hogan 25 years ago, and it's been a fantastic relationship and journey during that time. I started designing the Hogan 360 powered by PPC 20 years ago, and it's now in 17 languages, and I have to pinch myself, a boy from Adelaide, and here's my assessment being used right around the world. So we're going to do 7 things during this webinar. One is talk about some global best practice trends using assessments, including the 360. What is the current state of play? Secondly, we'll be looking at a recent study on coaching and what is best practice coaching. Thirdly, I'll be talking to you about how I use the HBI, the HDS and the MVPI for greatest impact when I'm teaching or coaching using those 3 personality assessments, and just give you my little insights and tips. Then we're going to have a case study. I've got a fascinating gentleman called Jared Sample. He's a real person. He's still being coached by me, and we're going to look at using the personality assessments together with the Hogan 360, what and the why, and how the 2 together are very powerful for coaching and development. Then I want to share 2 pieces of research. We've just done what are the most recent correlations between personality assessments and the 360. The good news is we've got incredible validity and reliability coming from the science of these assessments. The coefficients are fantastic. So I'll share that with you. Also, we've got the latest benchmarks. My team have done a wonderful job putting together the annual update that we do, and there's some fascinating material about what do great leaders do that separates them from the rest of the pack. Finally, I'm going to finish with my email contact. We won't really have much time today for Q&A. We've got more than 60 registrations. So I'm going to suggest if you want further information or have any questions, please contact me directly, and I promise I'll come back to you. So fasten your seatbelts. I'm excited, and I hope you get a lot out of this webinar. So some of the global trends. Firstly, most sophisticated organisations now say that you should be using personality assessment and 360. We get the why, we get the what, we get the behaviour below the waterline, the behaviour above the waterline, and using the 2 together is the most cost-effective and powerful way for assessing leadership potential or measuring leadership performance at a point in time. So the 2 are perfectly together, and it doesn't have to be a cost exercise that breaks the bank. It can be very good value for money. Secondly, 10 years ago, the 360 moved essentially about giving someone individual feedback. Hey, we've done your feedback, here's your 360, let's do a debrief. There really wasn't much measurement of return on investment or a second or third coaching session. You didn't have to share your 360 with your manager. HR really couldn't use it for anything like career development or succession planning. But thank God we've moved on. The latest literature says that the 360 assessment is now a main HR practice. So I'm aware of organisations that use it for annual performance reviews, including salary, identification of high potentials, leadership programs, career planning, and even maybe your next promotion. So it is a well-established, well-integrated part of the broader HR practices, not just a simple one-off feedback tool. Then I want to give you a famous quote that I've been working on for the last week to get ready for this webinar. Not all 360s are created equally. There are some dodgy ones. There's some that don't have any science or rigor. Someone invents a leadership competency model and says, let's go and build a house of cards called a 360. So 360 has to be robust, scientifically valid, it's very rigorous. So one of the great things about working with Hogan partners in the States is that they're so strong in science, and we love partnering them to make sure that our assessments not only integrate beautifully with each other, but have a lot of validity and reliability. And we support this with technical manuals and white papers and coaching manuals, the whole lot. There also needs to be, when you're looking at a 360, the concept of very, very robust benchmarks. The benchmarks can be as percentiles. So on a scale of 1 to 7, what was my mean average score? Am I at the 90th percentile, the 75th, the 50th, the 25th, the 10? And we think our 360 is better than anything else in the marketplace with those benchmarks around your percentile cut-off scores. The other thing we can do, because we now have 17,500 managers in our new 2020 benchmarking database, is we're experts on industries. We can tell you we've got so much data on this industry if you want an industry benchmark. We can do it by job level. We've got board members, CEOs, frontline supervisors, so we can say apples with apples. And very excitingly, we've got what do high performers look like. We use the 75th percentile cutoff. So we can do that for CEOs, middle managers, supervisors. Why don't we compare you to the very best? So one of our clients is Shell, and they're very strong on people and business analytics. And we established the causal link between a leader, the team engagement, the employee engagement, and the performance, which includes safety, efficiency, sales, productivity. And those causal links can be very, very important. So in Shell, for example, they set a benchmark at the 75th percentile to try and get the very best out of their managers in the 360 and the associated development that's invested in them. Next, a word of warning. There are increasingly a lot of customized 360 being built, and typically it's because an organisation says we've got a new leadership competency framework. It could be we've remodeled the values, we've got some more strategic goals, we think we're a bit unique in the marketplace, when in truth they're not. But we can certainly help with the customization, and we know which of our items are core to giving you any global benchmark or a relative score that has meaning, and even the strengths and opportunities tables are an important anchor. So happy to help with customizations, but just be careful. A lot of organisations are, as I said, building a house of cards that lacks a little bit of science. And if you don't have the external benchmarks, how the hell do you give someone a score that has any relative meaning? You know, what is that score against what? And in most cases, it's against nothing. So be careful. The conceptual model that sits behind using Hogan Personality and Hogan 360 is the following. It's something that Dr. Robert Hogan is still passionate about. I'm passionate about it. We believe that leadership drives engagement and engagement drives performance. Sometimes we call this the LEAP model, an acronym: leadership, engagement and performance. So all of the big engagement providers in the world, whether it's Culture Amp or Glint or Aon Hewitt, their data shows that leadership has the single biggest impact on employee engagement. That could be leadership from an individual person, the CEO or GM, or the leadership team. And so therefore we take employee engagement very seriously, and we've mapped the causal links to bottom line performance, customer satisfaction, productivity, safety, financial metrics. In fact, Gallup surveys show that leadership is responsible for 70% of employee engagement. If that's true, and I think it's not far off the money, then why wouldn't you be taking leadership very seriously and investing in leadership to measure it and improve its effectiveness? Shell, their data says that about 50% of the variance on employee engagement comes from the leader or the leadership team. So there's no doubt about it that leadership is responsible for having the biggest impact on engagement and performance. So what we try to do with people and business analytics is get that causal link. We're investing in leadership. What's the outcome? What's the bottom line? So in going forward, the global trends are now around tying the measurement and improvement of leadership effectiveness to return on investment. going to show you some data shortly. 2/3 of companies would like to do this more effectively, and it's combining your people and business analytics. So in a moment, I'll give you our model, what are the tools available, and how do we go about this. But return on investment, quite rightly, is now on the agenda. The two biggest metrics that we want leaders to be responsible for is driving employee engagement and organisational performance. How can you measure employee engagement? Go to one of the reputable global engagement providers. Like I said, there's Sorota, Glint, Culture Amp. There's a whole lot of good ones out there. Measure that engagement. The stats at the moment are showing 2/3 of people are highly engaged. They will stay with the organisation and give discretionary effort. So it pays for itself by retention and performance. 1/3 are disengaged, and of that 1/3, half are sharing their misery with their co-workers, perhaps drinking vinegar for breakfast or sucking lemons for morning tea. But you sort of think about who are our most toxic people that are destroying value in the business. Organisational performance, typically it's a balanced scorecard, financial and non-financial. So what's the bottom line in terms of your financial outcomes, the employee performance, the retention, for example, or sick leave, the customer experience, and what are your metrics showing there? And then finally, service and operational excellence. So all of those business outcomes tend to be driven by effective leaders and highly engaged employees. So let's talk about Hogan assessments and Hogan 360. I always say, give me someone's Hogan personality assessments and their 360, and they've got no place to hide. We've got them below the waterline, above the waterline, the why and the what, and the coaching experience, the leadership development program is so rich when you're using both tools together. So a little bit about the combination here. I've already mentioned that it captures the complete person. So the Hogan personality is the why behind what we might see at work. It explains what's really going on inside the person that unless we know them really well, we might never guess. So that's getting below the waterline. Above the waterline is the 360, the multi-rater assessment from 10 to 14 of your co-workers. I call this your love note from work. What is your reputation? What is your brand? And the 360 will capture that very, very accurately. So then we have the complete person, and we then know we can build self-awareness and self-regulation around better managing your personality and the necessary behaviours to be that very effective leader. So I always say we start with Daniel Goleman's model of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-regulation. You have to have assessments to get that self-awareness to start the self-regulation. Then you dig into the motivation. Is that person motivated to step up and be a better leader? Fortunately, leadership can be learned. So that's the great news. Personality is not fate. Okay, so our model, I mentioned LEAP, Leadership, Engagement and Performance. And we've worked closely with Dr. Robert Hogan. I was just emailing him in the last 24 hours around some of our research. From an organisational perspective, let's start with number one. We decide to measure and improve the leadership effectiveness in the organisation. There are 3 assessments, and you don't have to use ours, but we would love you to because we think it's the gold standard. But you say, well, let's do the personality assessments. And in our situation, it's the HPI, the HDS and the MVPI. Idealised self and the likely behaviours that will help or hinder me. We then throw in the multi-rater, which is the Hogan 360, and that actually establishes both your behavioural and business competencies at work as seen by others. And we love breaking it down. That's why we call it a 360. What has your boss got to say about you? What did your peers think your reputation is? And how did your direct reports see you? And that column could be whether, in fact, you're leading a high-performing team. Then we come to the third assessment, which is the high-performing team assessment. We're very proud of this little tool. We've had it going for about 7 years now. There's not many team assessments available in the marketplace. They're few and far between. And I think the concept of high-performing teams is talked about in business, but not taken seriously. For example, should high-performing teams be a goal in the strategic business plan for organisations? Should it be measured annually? So Bob Hogan has this famous quote, leadership is about results, teams deliver results, therefore judge the leader by their team. And that's exactly what our high-performing team assessment does. Over the years, lots of us can think of teams that we've worked with that were dysfunctional or average, and the goal was to get them, in the Jim Collins language, from good to great. So our team assessment does a great job of saying, right, you've all gone online, the members of the team, you've assessed the team as it is today, here's your score, here's the opportunities to improve, and let's make an improved score a KPI next time around. So they're the only 3 tools you can use when you're assessing leadership and leadership teams. And all 3 together are very, very impactful. Then what we want to see coming out of that leadership effectiveness, stakeholder action and engagement, and the 2 biggest stakeholders are your employees. So classically, you do the engagement survey. Then you want to see the customer satisfaction informed by the customer experience, and what are they saying about how they feel about the organisational connectivity. Then out of that comes organisational performance, your KPIs, your business results. So we're saying that leadership really drives the employee and customer experience, and if that's enhanced and top quartile, you should be getting quite sound business results depending on the industry you're in. And not all industries are doing it equally at the moment. So there's the 5 tools and the way we use those 5 tools to generate bottom line results. Okay, I mentioned we'd touch on what's happening in the world of coaching, and this comes from the Coach Source 2018 research. It's the most recent global benchmark that they use. And when it comes to coaching, the good news is 92% of organisations are using a 360 tool. So it's fabulous because science should inform the coaching. I get a bit cynical sometimes about coaching if there's no rigour and no assessments being used. The other good news was that 71% of organisations who use coaching are using Hogan personality assessments as their preferred personality suite of tools. And they found that the use of Hogan's is far ahead of other assessments such as Myers-Briggs and DISC. And they were very complimentary about the Hogan. They said it has easily experienced the fastest jump of any assessments we've studied over the years. So I never have any problem saying that the Hogan assessments is the gold standard, the industry leader. What else can we tell you about coaching? 63% of organisations reported not linking coaching to business results, but would like to do so. Big opportunity. The second point, there's a trend of internal coaches coaching at the lower levels of the organisation, and for senior people, particularly middle managers and suite executives, their coaches should be external. And external coaches are preferred by coachees 82% of the time. They feel more comfortable having an expert from outside their organisation. And we at PBC love doing that coaching, and it's assessment based. Okay, Mark Efron is one of the newer authors that's in reading these days. And I picked up on his formula. Core personality plus chosen behaviour is how others see us. So the core personality comes from your Hogan personality assessments. The chosen behaviour is picked up in your 360 review. I'm playing around with this language a little bit at the moment. I mentioned earlier, self-awareness is key to understanding your core personality and self-regulating that personality so you can learn leadership behaviours, which will enhance career success, teams results, and organisational performance. So maybe it's along the lines of self-awareness plus self-regulation is the key to understanding personality and developing necessary leadership behaviours to get the best out of you. And that then is how others see us, our workplace reputation. I also like this book. These 2 authors have got a distinguished track record with their literature, and it says that leadership can be learned. And I love those words, by deliberate practice. It takes a lot of motivation, a lot of effort. You're teaching your brain to build new mental muscles so that the new habits or competencies become second nature. I've seen some fantastic leadership development where it wasn't in your personality, i.e. it wasn't innately part of your DNA, but through hard practice over many years, people have learned some fantastic competencies. It's like saying I'm not a natural public speaker, but I'm going to Toastmasters. I want to learn the basics. So effort, hard work can get you there. And I think the second point's true. The best leaders become the best because they work damn hard at it. They put in lots of hours of practice. they're aware of leadership competencies and how to build a high-performing team, and they go for it. The exciting thing about our webinar today is I can share you what best practice competencies are that is hot off the press just from our recent research. We've now got the most insightful piece of information and science behind what it is that distinguishes a great leader from the rest of the pack. So the third point, becoming a leader, involves becoming a better learner. So we always test for how someone is open to learning. And the great news is leadership's not about personality, it's about behaviour, i.e. personality is not fate. It's what you do with your behavioural opportunities in life. So part of putting together this webinar today was for me to share some insights into the way I get the deepest and most impactful meaning out of the 3 personality assessments. I like to talk of the MVPI, idealised self, the person I want to be. It captures lifestyle needs when we look at the subscales, my core beliefs, my occupational preferences, what I'm looking for by way of work and industry and culture, aversions, whether I have any unconscious biases and dislikes of people or settings that don't demonstrate a particular value, and your preferred associates, your favourite people, co-workers that you might gravitate towards. I'm going to show you in a moment how I use the MVPI with those 5 subscales to get the greatest takeaway value. Then I describe the HPI and the HDS as the likely behaviour that will help or hinder your career and life success. And the latest research shows when you're using these 3 Hogans with matched sets of 360s, the HPI can pinpoint what to hire for, the HDS can pinpoint where the derailment issues are likely, and the MVPI was a little bit more neutral, but the MVPI can be used for cultural alignment, the values fit between the individual and the organisation. So for example, at World Vision, one of our clients now for more than 10 years, their 2 highest scoring values are tradition and altruistic. And basically, if you don't look for alignment there, you're not going to get the fit to create a great culture of engagement. So you're all with the MVPI. I love all 3 Hogan personality assessments, and sometimes I fall in love more with one and then it goes around in a circle. So most of the time these days I start with the MVPI. Very safe, very non-threatening. It's just you at a point in time and what your hot buttons are. So we have those 10 scales. I'm assuming you are really familiar with those 10 scales. So now I'm going to take a deep dive into the subscales. So that's where the point of this masterclass is to perhaps give you a few insights into being confident about taking a deeper dive into that data. So let me introduce to you a very good friend of mine, Jared Sample, a beautiful surname here to have a sample report today. And we will be looking at Jared shortly to just look at his 360 and his Hogans in totality, and then show you what's going on and where he's doing brilliantly and where he's not doing well at all. So if you're using the flash report on page 2, you get the subscales. So 4 blue bricks is the maximum score you can use, which means it's really high, very statistically significant. 3, above average, still warm. 2, probably in the neutral zone, and then 1 and 0, not having much of an impact. So for example, with Jared, he got 4 out of 4 for preferred associates. He likes to hang out with people who love recognition. So giving recognition, receiving recognition, probably talking about their achievements, what they've done lately with PBs, but he doesn't need it at work. Can you see that? 0 for occupational preference. So if you're managing Jared, he's a light touch. He doesn't need much air in his tyre. Power was interesting. Power is having a strong achievement orientation, defining yourself by your PBs and against others with your KPIs. So he believes in working hard and going hard. The belief system 4 out of 4. He has an aversion to people that don't go hard and don't have an achievement orientation. So at its worst, he could be someone that doesn't really like people who are half-hearted, not working hard, not putting 100% in, a low tolerance for poor performers. Hedonism, which is enjoying life, fun, pleasure, hobbies, travel, all the bases are loaded here. So for Jared, it's the meaning of life, and in particular, the occupational preference, because that's the most work-related. He wants to see a fun culture at work. Altruistic, not so. He's working in a private sector company. So what I do is then take one's occupational preferences and the others that are sitting here, and where we get 4 out of 4, because it's maximum, we then like to map it. Now, I can make these sheets available to you, so if any of you want further information, I'll give you my email contact shortly, and please ask for any of our research or give me your questions. So with this particular sheet, if I'm running a classroom activity, I get everyone to write down the name of the 10 scales, starting with recognition and power and so on, where you had 4 out of 4 against these subscales. So if I go back to Jared, for example, he had lifestyle at 4 out of 4 for recognition and hedonism. So we go over here to lifestyle, and he's going to write recognition and hedonism. That's the meaning of life. Beyond work, that's what he needs. And then he can say, well, am I getting it, and so on. The belief system, he's got power and he's got hedonism. So he's going to write power and hedonism as his belief system. That's his moral compass. It's the way he looks at the world and makes decisions. It's being true to one's convictions. Occupational preferences, what did he have here? He had a 4 out of 4 for hedonism. So he's going to write hedonism here. He wants a fun culture. Aversions, he's got 4 out of 4 for power, 4 out of 4 for hedonism. So he's going to write down, I dislike people or environments that can't have fun and aren't achievement oriented, and etc. Now, you can spend a good hour with someone here just coaching them around, well, are you currently having your lifestyle needs met? Your belief system, are you living your life true to those beliefs and using that to inform decisions and judgments? Occupational preference, what do you need from work and are you currently getting that, etc. So a very powerful way of coaching an individual and a classroom. This opens up a conversation between the whole group if they start sharing in a trusting environment. Then we take it a step further. We like to then say, well, let's look at the MBPI scales and subscales where the subscales had scores of 4 out of 4, meaning quite statistically significant. This is an example of a public service team that I worked with recently. There were about 30 in the team, and we simply did the maths of which of the scales scored 4 out of 4 for the in the occupational preferences, meaning it's what we want to see at work. It's the culture we desire. It's perhaps even an unconscious desire for the culture that we can now map. So we had very high altruistic, 14 of the 30 said that's the most important thing they want to see at work. So a public service team, they're there for a purpose, they're there to make a difference, and we should use that altruism in the business plan. How do we make a difference, and what's the utility of what we do, and how do we leave a legacy? Affiliation, they want to see a constructive culture, a high-performing team, good employee engagement, great place to work, and they want to have security. They like structure, order, stability, financial security, job security. So the way we use that one is, let's be honest about things, let's have cards face up, let's use that to inform our communication strategy. Always tell people where they stand, a policy of no surprises. So I can't recommend highly enough how doing this for a team, either a management team or the broader employee population, to find out what the highest scores were and use that to shape some of our business planning and the design of our values and behaviours to drive the culture. Because in this case, they were the 3 hot buttons. The HPI, I love the HPI. It's the most popular tool for selection and development, and it has the highest correlations with the 360 data. I tend to focus mainly on adjustment, ambition, interpersonal sensitivity and prudence. I find those 4 are the richest of the 7 scales, particularly then when you look at correlations with 360 data. So high adjustment is resilience and emotional control, positive energy, positive mojo. Ambition demonstrates that we're competitive, assertive, leader-like, confident, passionate, even big picture. One of the 7 scales that most accurately identifies leadership potential or leadership effectiveness. Interpersonal sensitivity is people skills. Social skill, I either like people or I don't. And prudence is professionalism and conscientiousness. So they're the four that are most normally predictive of having a good discussion with an individual or a group about what this means in terms of likely behaviour or necessary behaviour. So I mentioned the four I focus on. It's adjustment, it's the ambition, it's the interpersonal sensitivity and prudence. Those four scales, scoring high, tend to drive very good 360 outcomes. Now, within the HPI, you'd be aware that there are many different scales, and you need to be a subscale expert if you're teaching or coaching or looking at the data. So, for example, just to name one, I always have a close look in interpersonal sensitivity at the subscale called likes people. The truth is, 4 out of 4, you definitely like people. Probably you're going to have social skill, the ability to be engaging, make others feel valued. Or I was debriefing one this morning where the person had 0 for likes people. They're a loner, they're task focused, pretty good IQ, but want to be left alone to do their work. They prefer work, not people. So the subscales do give you that fantastic insights when you're coaching. The HDS, the dark side, scores at 70 and above move you sometimes from having a strength to a derailer if you're not coping, if you're stressed, if you're not self-regulating anymore, or you just drop your mask. Now, how do I use the HDS 11 scales? I tend to focus on scores 70 and above, and we then hand out what I call the red flag sheet. And if you haven't seen this or you want to get another copy, include that in your email to me, because the Hogans have done a unique job in their technical manual of identifying 8 red flags for each of the 11 scales. And the 8 red flags are behavioural characteristics associated with having high scores that could derail you. So I'm going to give you a little example here. This is 3 that I often come across. So if you're high excitable, we describe you as intense, enthusiastic, energetic, worried, etc. Then the second and third columns give you your red flags. Now, when I'm coaching or teaching, this is self-selection. You say to people, if your excitable is above 70, please now identify your red flags. Which of the 8 do you think is in your DNA, your makeup? And I find that people are pretty honest. In a team setting, you'll get a little bit of collaborative work here where someone says, "Oi, you better add that one," because I get people to read them out. You create a trusting environment where it's safe to share. So that's the excitable one. Excitable is the most toxic. If you've got a high excitable score, you really do need that 360 to see if they're derailing through aggression, moodiness, anger, spitting the dummy, throwing the toys out of the cot. Cautious. I picked cautious because I think if Dr. Robert Hogan was talking to you, he might say that a very high cautious could be a sign of an ineffective leader because they can't make decisions, they're not comfortable being fast-paced, they tend to sit on the fence, they're motivated not to fail, and you need the 360 then to say, well, how is that cautious playing out at work? So in the red flags there, that first one, motivated not to fail, is the most obvious one. Diligent person, we love a diligent person on their way up the ladder. It's very predictive of successful work because you're organised, you've got high standards. But when you're leading a big team, it can become a derailer. You're too fussy, you're too demanding, you're critical, you're nitpicky, you've got that red pen out far too often. And that can be a big derailer in not leading a good team. So please think about the red flags and using it to get the self-awareness and the coaching going, and then eventually look for correlations with the 360. We also have a sheet called HDS, Hogan Development Survey Watch Out, which we use for low scores. So in your dark side, if we see scores below 20, particularly single digit scores, 0, 3, 7, 8, I tend to say, have a look at this watch out page and pick out the ones that are low and highlight the words that could be part of your behavioural DNA. So a very low skeptical person might fess up that they're a little bit naive or gullible, too trusting, and then you say, what's the implications at work? A very low bold person might say, I'm not assertive, I don't exercise leadership readily, I tend to be a bit timid, a little bit mouse-like. And a low dutiful person might say, I shoot first and ask questions later. which means I could be inappropriately challenging my boss. I could be inappropriately challenging the hierarchy or disagreeing with policy decisions, not choosing the time and place carefully, and you derail your relationship with the hierarchy. So very low scores on the HDS are worth paying attention to. Okay, so a case study. Here's Jared's sample where we've got the Hogan and the 360. Jared's in the private sector. He reports to a CEO. He knows that time management is a big issue. He overcommits and he doesn't keep himself accountable with a checklist. He gets distracted. He's mischievous too much of the time, and others see him as being a bit disorganized. Here's the benchmark on a scale of 1 to 7 for our percentiles, because we have so many 360s in our database. Jared's score has unfortunately gone backwards from the previous year. He's gone from being a 5.7, which had him above the 50th percentile, to a 5.4. He was quite shattered. He thought he was working on some of the new habits and new competencies, but in fact, his cohort said you've gone backwards. So let's have a look at the strengths table, which is a unique part of our 360 tool. 26 strengths, people have to pick 4, and we weight the votes 4, 3, 2, 1. So he got told that he's got fantastic people skills, 24 votes. That's normally ranked 14th in the global average. So brilliant people skills. Yet when you see his Hogan Flash report in a moment, you'll see that he's had to work damn hard at that one. So that's an example of someone, despite their personality below the waterline, are doing brilliantly. The same with the 4th one, building relationships, and he's working hard and he's competent. So they're his strengths. His opportunities: hopeless at time management, just disorganized, spreading himself too thin, and needs to be a clearer communicator and be a bit more action oriented, which is the same as the time management. Notice the global averages. Those global averages are where these items normally rank in our broader pool, so you can do some strategic benchmarking here. So time management, not normally such a big problem for most other managers, really a bit of a unique challenge for Jared. Let's have a look at his Hogan results. Fascinating data. Look at the interpersonal sensitivity. This is real. I haven't dummied the data. It is 0. Jared does not like people. He's insensitive. He's uncaring. But look at sociability. He loves a good time. So to be honest, Jared is a user of people when he needs entertainment. When he feels like a quick fix of socialising, being in the kitchen, a happy hour, he can turn on the charm and charisma and enjoy it. But deep down, he's not a people person. Yet what was his #1 strength? We go back here, fantastic people skills. So Jared really works hard to be consistently a people person, even though it doesn't come natural. Look at his prudence score, 11. He's just not organised. He's not naturally a conscientious person. He gets distracted. He's big picture. He likes life in the fast lane, and that explains his #1 opportunity in the table as being time management. So pretty good correlations with the HPI. Then we look at the HDS, and you can see the first 5 are pretty high, which is the loner profile. He likes to distance himself from people. He likes to be able to focus on his work. He spends a lot of time in his car doing a lot of traveling. I think that's his me time. Have a look at reserved, 96. Again, cold, tough, not a people person, not loving and kind-hearted, a bit distant, uncommunicative. But look at colourful at 97, which is normally the opposite of reserved. Social charisma, can entertain, good at public speaking, great with clients. So he's got these 2 scales fighting against each other. And on this occasion, reserved has been suppressed when we go back to his strengths around people skills. The colourful is winning. What else is important here? Look at the mischievous score, 100. Jared is just naughty. That's the plain truth of it. He gets distracted. He takes calculated risk. He can be impulsive, hot-blooded, and that impacts his time management. And finally, have a look at his diligence score. Oh my God, 6. That goes with the very low prudence. He's just not naturally organised. So that time management is going to be a huge challenge to his career, and he's got to learn new habits and disciplines to get on top of that one, just as he had to consistently demonstrate good people skills, which doesn't come easily. So there's an example of using the personality with the multi-rater, and that way you get the whole jigsaw in front of you to make sense of it. His values: hedonism, good fun. We saw that earlier. Commerce, he loves making money. Look at the affiliation. he has no real desire for positive social interaction. So that just is part of the people component that we're looking at. Okay, the correlations. This is our new research. We've just put together 2,500 sets, match sets of where we've got personality data and the multi-rater. Dr. Ryan Sherman, the Chief Scientific Officer from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Hogan head office, has helped us put this research together. So we're looking at the HPI scales on the left, the 4 main domains inside our 360 at the top horizontal, with what gives you a good 360 score in the final column. Green is the positive correlation, red is a negative correlation. So adjustment does pick up self-management and relationship management, no surprise, good validity coefficient there. Ambition is good for working in the business and working on the business. That's where producing results. Interpersonal sensitivity, oh my God, look how powerful that one is. And prudence is great, except for working on the business quite naturally. So that's why I said I put a fair bit of time into looking at adjustment, ambition, interpersonal sensitivity and prudence. They're the most predictive of getting a good 360. Some of the individual items, we have 50 items in our 360, and these are some of the fantastic correlations. So you can see that adjustment correlates just brilliantly with these 4 items: calm and even-tempered, managing your emotions. So it's about self-awareness, self-regulation and resilience, but wonderful validity here. Then we've got ambition. This time the ambition person comes out as being competitive, passionate, assertive. They're here to make a difference and to win, and they think long-term about opportunities. This is where I said earlier, ambition correlates most obviously with having leadership DNA. The interpersonal sensitivity, look at this one, friendly, warm and thoughtful, but passionate as well. Great people skills, making people feel valued. So a lot of interpersonal sensitivity. And I always say that if you combine a high adjustment, the resilience, with the high interpersonal sensitivity, you've got the best Hogan baseline of emotional intelligence. They're the 2 I use, with both high scores predicting a strong natural level of emotional intelligence. Then we've got prudence, which is professionalism and conscientiousness, polite, ethical, even-tempered, no double standards. They're just the nicest good citizens to have in your team. So very strong correlations there. The HDS, you can see the moving away or loner profile. The first 5, excitable, skeptical, cautious, reserved, leisurely. That combination is 20% of the population. They prefer to move away or be a loner. Their focus is doing work, not people. They like to work from home, work in a corner, put music in their ears, shut the door, come in early, stay back late. They really find it hard to do people. So the excitable can be emotional frustration. The skeptical can be harsh and cynical. The cautious can be motivated to fail and ineffective leadership. The reserved is tough and cold, unloving, and leisurely, too independent, running your own race. So the HDS correlations with the 360 show that if you've got that loner profile, you have to work twice as hard as someone without that profile to get a good 360. And it can be done. I've got great examples of leaders that have worked against their natural Hogan DNA to achieve really good 360s, but it takes a lot of effort. You'll see that working on the business, the green correlation was mischievous, colourful and imaginative. That's the big picture, and that correlates back to ambition in the HPI. And do you like that little diligence score? Working in the business, high standards, the control freak, the micromanager, very organised, very hardworking. Here's some examples, negative correlations. I think I picked the first 4 HDSs. Excitable people generally get caught out for being volatile, temperamental, not using their emotions maturely, not being positive. Excitable is the most toxic of the 11 HDS scales. Skeptical, they're not positive. Again, they're not controlling their emotions. They're not polite. And I always say, if you've got an excitable in the 90s with a skeptical in the 90s, whoa, you better get that 360 out to see if there's any negative impact on the workplace. Cautious, they're just not competitive. They're not assertive. They don't have strong influencing skills. They're not passionate. And the truth is they struggle to be that effective leader because they're motivated not to fail. They don't offer their opinions. They're not decisive. They don't like being strategic. Reserve, don't have good people skills, don't really care about the customer, not really assertive, don't build relationships. So the reserved is tough, cold, distant, putting work way ahead of people. Okay, then we come to the MVPI, and what we find here is there's not so much red and green consistently in any of the 10 scales. Altruistic is positive. Those people are determined to make a difference. So they're quite driven, hence the working on the business for the altruistic person. And that's the one that does correlate with a good 360. Affiliation, positive social interaction, has a bit going for it. Commerce, if you're just focused on commercial results, it doesn't help you get a good 360. So you've got to be careful here. So I tend to say the HPI is the most predictive of where you might generate a good 360. The HDS tells you how you could be derailing. MVPI, more neutral, but think about using the MVPI for job fit, culture fit within the organisation. And that's where all three Hogans as a package can be fantastic value. Hogan 360 benchmarks. We're very excited to share these benchmarks with you. And if you'd like any of this data, just drop us a note and we'll put something together for you. The benchmarks is 17,680 managers in our database. This is our 360 database. And we're then able to break it down by industry, by sector, by gender, by job level, by top quartile, and massive research. And I'm very proud of my psychologists and consultants who drive this research, because at PPC, we provide evidence-based solutions. We use the science to inform our practice and help our clients. So a massive database of 360s. One of the things we did, because I can't share all the research in this short time with you, we're able to break the different groups in our database down by job level. So you can see the first column is CEO and executive board members, then divisional leaders, very senior leaders in the business, general managers, still senior, but getting more towards the middle, manager, supervisor, frontline, and high potential employees who might have gone through the 360. Now, this is our strengths table. There are 26 items, which comes from researching 30,000 open text responses about managers' strengths, that we put together a table of 26, and the raters picked the top 4, and these are now ranked in order of high to low. I think I picked out the top 10. So what I've done is included the job level, but broken this down at the 75th percentile. So what do leaders look like when they're at the 75th percentile across all job levels? So I've circled half a dozen there that would appear to be more unique to the CEOs at this 75th percentile. And it might establish, well, what is best practice when we're investing in leadership development for others? So you can see the CEO has strong leadership skills, but so does the general manager. The CEO is visionary and strategic, and normally that doesn't feature high. It's normally 10th, 12th, etc. for others. Go down to customer focused, thinking market, looking outside the organisation, more strategic. That's stronger for the CEO. Motivates and inspires others. The CEO's doing that, but not the others. And setting clear goals and driving results. Again, more unique to the CEO, and then being competitive and determined. So the 6 I've marked would give you indicative of data of what it takes to be a fantastic leader on your journey from being a supervisor up to the C-suite. These are some of the competencies you're going to have to be taught, so it can inform coaching practices, leadership programs. We also looked at the 50 ranked items in our 360 and drew out the ones that were stronger for the CEO at the 75th percentile to sort of differentiate what the great senior leaders look like at the top of the tree. We also do the opportunities table, and what's interesting here is the top 3 are shared across the board. There's no real differentiation here. So stop taking on too much and spreading yourself thin. The number 1 problem for all leaders. Challenge poor performers, 2nd or 3rd. Those poor performers are alive and well. They're really annoying their co-workers and they're wanting you to do something about them. So the challenge is to improve them or remove them in the next 90 days if you take that issue seriously. And number 3, delegate more, which I think goes with number 1. So the challenge is I take on a lot because I'm hardworking, but have I got the right balance between working in the business and on the business? Am I too operational, not strategic enough? Am I firefighting and being crisis management rather than, for example, setting the strategy and challenging the poor performers? So there's two big opportunities there. Better workload management is being in control of your workload, number one, and delegating more, plus the challenge poor performers. So what we think we can do, and this is the first time I've ever shared this, is we think we now know what the three meta competencies are for great leaders achieving 75th percentile results. Number one, they clearly have leadership DNA, whether it's innate or learned, doesn't matter. And they're the 6 competencies that live inside that first meta competency. That comes from this latest research in our benchmarking document, which we're happy to share with you if you'd like to see it. Number 2, they're very good on strategy. They think longer term, they're visionary, they're innovative. So what does success look like compared to other organisations? We're trying to stay ahead of them. So great competencies there, teaching managers to be strategic, getting a better balance of in the business, on the business. And number 3, great leaders are engaging. And this is important because we know that employee engagement is critical to bottom line outcomes. So these people have passion, they're motivational, they work hard on morale, they bring a positive attitude, they're very customer focused. So this is the first time we've ever nailed this level of research down because we have such extensive benchmarking data. Very excited about this. Then we've also added the opportunities that are common across all managers, and I've called better workload management the one that picks up stop taking on too much and spreading yourself too thin and delegate more. So that's what I'm calling better workload management. That should be across the board when we're doing leadership competency frameworks or coaching or leadership programs. Stop. Are you in charge of your workload, or is your workload in charge of you? Where do you add the most value? Now, are you strategic enough? So we challenge people to say how much of your time is in the business and how much is on the business. A lot of middle managers, even senior managers, would say 80 to 90% in the business, 10 to 20% on. Then you say, what should it be? And they go 60-40, 50-50. So that's a really good conversation to have, because we're not necessarily getting the strategic value out of that work ethic. And then the other one here is challenging poor performers. We know that 1/3 of people are disengaged through the engagement surveys. Half of that, which is 16%, are sharing their misery and destroying organisational value, and the co-workers don't like them. So as I said, no one really likes challenging poor performers, but it ought to be a strategic issue, not a HR issue. It ought to be in the business plan. 90 days, improve them or remove them. Now, those findings, that data that I've just showed you, the 5 meta competencies, the 3 positives and the 2 opportunities, how can we use that data? 1, we can create better leadership competency models with organisations based on this science. Too many organisations are just making their competency model up out of the latest fad, the new HR manager, the new learning and development manager, see a shiny bright object and design a model. You then say, does that model have any legs? Does it have any science and rigour? They go, no, but they're still getting away with it. So we can use our data to say, you know what? Instead of building a house of cards, we can give you some scientific rigour. Here's the 5 key result areas if you want to build fantastic leadership. 2, it can inform your training needs analysis. So you might come up with your own internal data, we can give you our data, and together we can then fashion the training intervention, the leadership spend. We can shape the content for leadership development programs. So it could be we start with self and other awareness using personality and 360, then move into high performing teams, and then a day as a CEO, teaching them those 5 meta competencies that are so important in their rise up the ladder. The 4th one, assist with talent identification and development. So who are your high potentials? Who are your rising stars? Let's do something with them, and let's use this wonderful data to really fashion that intervention. And the 5th one, it should influence coaching practices. So coaching ought to have assessments, but then we ought to be able to add extra value by knowing the competencies we're trying to build. So we're very excited about being able to use these new findings with our clients going forward. So here's my famous quote. Maybe Bob Hogan's still got more famous quotes than me, but I say, give me a manager's Hogan personality assessments and their Hogan 360 results, and they have no place to hide. That's all the data we need. Sure, there's other assessments out there. The judgment tool is fantastic. You can do some cognitive testing, but essentially, if you're working on leadership development and coaching, these two together get you off to a flying start. It's fantastic to have that data. The last slide, because I've been talking for a fair while, with 60 plus registrations today for this webinar, and the fact that I wanted to cover a lot of material, I made a decision we wouldn't throw it open for questions and answers, because not everyone's interested in other people's questions. But please, if you've got any questions, there's my email contact, pberry@peterberry.com.au. Ask me any questions. Ask me if you'd like any of this information sent through to you, any of the research or the data or the benchmarks. And we take great pride in being customer centric and working with our favourite people. So if you've any queries or any information, don't be shy, reach out to us and we're happy to help. Can I just thank you sincerely for giving up an hour of your time today to join our webinar. I hope I haven't gone too quickly, but I wanted to touch on a lot of data. You will be getting a copy of our PowerPoint. My staff will reach out to you and make sure you get the whole slide pack. And I hope you and your co-workers and your family are staying safe and healthy. And thank you again from me and my team.